I hung up the phone, but my husband forgot to press the end button. Through the lingering connection, I heard the clink of glasses and a woman laughing softly. Then came the words that froze my blood. Does she actually believe you? Just keep acting tonight and push all the blame onto her. I did not scream or cry. I simply went numb. My marriage was not collapsing because of betrayal, but because they had turned me into a script long ago. My name is Sadie Foster, and up until 11 o'clock this evening, I believed my life was a sturdy structure built on 5 years of shared history and mutual respect. I was 37 years old, confident in my career, and steadfast in my marriage to Gavin Pierce. We were the couple friends envied for our stability. We did not fight in public. We did not air our grievances on social media. We were solid, or so I told myself as I sat in the living room of our quiet suburban home, watching the digital clock on the cable box tick forward. The house was too silent. It was the kind of silence that amplifies every creak of the floorboards and every hum of the refrigerator. Gavin was late again. This had become a pattern over the last 3 months, a rhythm of absence that he blamed on the demanding expansion of Arkwin Studios. He was a project manager there, and supposedly, the upcoming gala and a massive new client required his undivided attention 24 hours a day. I wanted to be the supportive wife. I wanted to be the partner who understood the grind. But tonight, a strange unease pricked at the back of my neck. A primitive instinct warning me that the shadows in the room were not just lack of light. I picked up my phone and dialed his number. It rang 4 times before he picked up. "Sadie? Hey." His voice was breathless, tight with a tension that sounded like stress, but felt like concealment. "You are still at the office?" I asked, keeping my tone light. I did not want to be the nagging wife. I refused to be that cliché. "Yeah, it is a nightmare here," Gavin said, the words rushing out. "The logistics team dropped the ball on the Clementine ballroom setup. I'm going to be stuck here for another 2 hours at least. Don't wait up for me, okay?" "Okay," I said. "Make sure you eat something." "I will. Love you. Bye." "Love you," I replied. I pulled the phone away from my ear, my thumb moving toward the red icon to end the call. But my finger stopped a millimeter from the glass. The screen was still illuminated, the call timer counting the seconds, 3 minutes and 12 seconds. Usually, Gavin was the one to hang up first, eager to get back to the chaos of his work. But this time, the line remained open. He must have lowered his phone, thinking I had already disconnected. Or perhaps he was just careless. I was about to tap the button, to sever the connection and go to bed, when a sound filtered through the tiny speaker. It was not the frantic typing of keyboards or the shouting of a stressed team trying to fix a logistics error. It was the distinct, crystal-clear chime of champagne flutes clinking together. I froze. My thumb hovered over the screen, trembling slightly. The silence of my living room was suddenly invaded by the atmosphere of a very different space. I heard the sharp click of high heels on a hard, tiled floor, the unmistakable rhythm of a confident walk. Then, a woman laughed. It was a low, throaty sound, intimate and mocking. I recognized that voice immediately. It belonged to Kendra Vale, a marketing executive at Arkwin who had been working closely with Gavin for the past 6 months. "Is she actually coming?" Kendra's voice came through, clear enough that she must have been standing right next to him. I pressed the phone back to my ear, my breath hitching in my throat. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a painful, erratic rhythm. "Yeah," Gavin replied. His voice was different now. The breathless stress was gone, replaced by a relaxed, arrogant, smooth tone I had not heard directed at me in years. "I told her I was stuck, but I will text her later to say I managed to get away. She will come to the gala if I ask her to." "Good," Kendra said. There was a cruel smile in her voice. "Tell her to come tonight. The more people, the better. Let her humiliate herself in front of everyone." I felt the blood drain from my face. My hand gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. This was not just an affair. This was malice. Why would they want me at the gala to be humiliated? Gavin laughed. a sound that chilled me to the bone. Don't worry. She won't dare do anything. She needs me. She is so wrapped up in being the perfect wife she wouldn't make a scene if the building was on fire. I did not scream. I did not throw the phone across the room. I sat there on my beige sofa, in the house we bought together, and I felt a cold, paralyzing numbness wash over me. It was as if someone had reached into my chest and flipped a switch, cutting the power to my emotions. I was no longer a wife listening to her husband. I was a witness observing a crime. Instinct took over. With a shaking finger, I did not press the end button. Instead, I swiped down on my screen and tapped the icon for the voice recorder. Merging the audio, I needed to capture this. I needed proof. I stared at the wall, my eyes wide and unblinking, while the little red dot on my screen pulsed. "What about the paperwork?" Kendra asked, the sound of liquid being poured filling the pause. "The audit is coming up next week." "I told you, it is handled," Gavin said dismissively. "I have the expense file ready. We just need to push Sadie's signature onto it to make it valid. She signs whatever tax documents I put in front of her anyway. She trusts me." The air left my lungs. Push Sadie's signature. The words echoed in my mind, rearranging the reality of my marriage in a single, violent second. This was not just about sex or a midlife crisis. They were talking about an expense file. They were talking about using my signature. My husband was not just cheating on me, he was setting me up. He was planning to frame me for financial impropriety at his company. "Just make sure it looks legitimate," Kendra said. "If the board sees her name on the approval line for the Clementine project, they will stop looking at us." "They will," Gavin assured her. "Sadie is the perfect scapegoat. Nobody suspects the grieving wife of a ruined marriage until it is too late." I felt sick. A physical wave of nausea rolled through me. They had a script. They had been rehearsing this. All those late nights, the missed dinners, the distracted looks. It was not just distance. It was preparation. "You are terrible," Kendra giggled, the sound like breaking glass. "I am practical," Gavin said. Then, there was a rustling sound, followed by the distant voice of a third person, perhaps a waiter or another staff member passing by. "Hey, careful with the phone," Kendra said sharply. "Remember to press end. Idiot." "Oh, right," Gavin muttered. There was a fumble, a scratch of static, and then the line went dead. I sat in the silence for a long time. The digital clock now read 11:05, 5 minutes. My entire life had been dismantled in 5 minutes. I looked at the phone in my lap. The recording was saved. I played it back, just the first few seconds, to make sure I hadn't imagined it. The sound of the clinking glasses, tinny but undeniable, filled the room. Let her humiliate herself. Push Sadie's signature. I stood up slowly. My legs felt heavy, like I was wading through deep water. I walked to the window and looked out at the dark street. A normal wife would be sobbing. A normal wife would be calling her mother or packing a bag. But I was not crying. I felt a cold, hard clarity settling in my stomach, replacing the nausea. Gavin thought I was weak. He thought I was a prop in his life, a convenient signature to keep him safe. A fool who would smile while he destroyed me. He thought the call had ended. He thought I was sitting at home, worrying about his dinner, waiting for him to come back to me. He was wrong. The Sadie Foster he knew had died the moment he laughed at my expense. The woman standing in the living room now was someone else entirely. I walked to my laptop and opened it. I created a new folder on the desktop. I did not name it divorce or evidence. I typed 2 words in capital letters, the cursor blinking against the white background like a challenge. End button. I dragged the audio file into the folder. My marriage was over, but the story was not. They wanted a show at the Clementine Ballroom? They wanted me to play a part? I would walk into that ballroom with my head high, but I would not be reading from their script. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark, waiting for the sound of his car in the driveway. I had a lot of work to do. The morning sun that filtered through the blinds of our master bedroom did not feel like a new beginning. It felt like an interrogation light, harsh and exposing. I had not slept in the bed. I had spent the hours between midnight and dawn sitting in the oversized armchair in the corner, watching Gavin sleep. He looked peaceful, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm, completely unaware that the woman watching him was no longer his wife, but an observer cataloging the end of his world. 5 years. That was the number on the calendar. We had been married for 5 years, and for the first 4, I had been the envy of my friends. Gavin used to be the man who called me every day at noon, just to hear my voice. He would send me photos of ridiculous things he saw on his commute. Little digital tethers that kept us connected even when we were miles apart. We were a team. We were solid. But somewhere in the last 12 months, the calls had stopped. The photos vanished. The tethers snapped, one by one, until the only communication I received from him was a text message at 6 p.m. that read simply, "Late again." I walked to the closet and pulled out his gray suit jacket, the one he had worn 2 days ago. I held it up to my face, inhaling deeply. It was a habit I had developed recently, one I despised. I used to hate women who snooped, who sniffed collars and checked pockets. I thought it was beneath dignity, but dignity is a luxury you lose when your husband stops looking you in the eye. There it was, underneath the scent of dry cleaning and his usual cologne. There was something else. It was faint, sweet, and floral, vanilla and jasmine. It was not my perfume. It was not the detergent we used. It was the scent of a lingering hug, a proximity that lasted longer than a professional greeting. I hung the jacket back up, my hands steady. Before last night, that scent would have made me cry. Today, it was just data. It was Exhibit A. I went downstairs to the kitchen. The coffee maker was already hissing. Gavin came down 10 minutes later, dressed for work, adjusting his tie in the reflection of the microwave. He looked tired, or perhaps he was just acting tired. "Morning," he muttered, grabbing a travel mug. He did not look at me. He looked at the floor, at the counter, at his watch, anywhere but my face. "Morning," I said. My voice sounded normal. It surprised me how easy it was to lie. "How was the meeting last night? You sounded stressed." He paused, his hand hovering over the sugar bowl. "Brutal. The logistics for the new project are a mess." I barely had time to think. "The new project," I repeated. "Yeah, the Clementine expansion. It is eating me alive." I watched him. I watched the way he shifted his weight from one foot to the other. I watched the way he blinked a little too fast. It was a performance. I realized then that for the past few months, I had not been living with a husband. I had been living with an actor rehearsing a role. His complaints about work, his exhaustion, his sudden need for privacy. It was all a script, and like any bad actor, he was overplaying it. "You have that big event coming up, right?" I asked, leaning against the island. "The anniversary gala?" Gavin stiffened. It was subtle, a tightening of the shoulders. But I saw it. "Yeah, next Friday." "I was thinking," I said, testing the water. "Maybe I should come. I have not seen your team in a while, and I bought that blue dress last month." He turned to me then, and for the first time, he met my eyes. Panic flickered in his gaze before he smoothed it over with a mask of concern. "Honestly, Sadie, you would be bored to tears," he said, his voice dropping to that patronizing register he now used. "It is not really a party. It is more of a networking slog. Just a bunch of investors talking about quarterly projections. I will be running around putting out fires all night. I would feel bad leaving you alone in a corner." "I can handle myself," I said softly. "I know you can," he said, reaching out to squeeze my shoulder. His touch felt like ice. "But I don't want you to have a miserable time. Plus, it is strictly employees and key stakeholders this year. Very dry. You are better off staying here, ordering some sushi, and relaxing." He smiled. It was the smile of a man who thought he had successfully managed a problem. He kissed my cheek, a dry, quick peck, and grabbed his keys. "I have to run. Don't wait up." When the front door clicked shut, the silence rushed back in. I walked over to the kitchen table where his iPad still sat. He had forgotten it in his haste, or perhaps he was just arrogant enough to believe I wouldn't touch it. I didn't need his passcode. I knew it was the year we met. I tapped in the 4 digits. The screen unlocked. I opened his calendar. The entry for next Friday did not say networking slog. It read, Arkwin 20th Anniversary Gala, Clementine Ballroom. I tapped on the details. It was a black tie event. There was a link to the guest list. I scrolled through it. Hundreds of names. Spouses were not just invited. They were encouraged. There was a note at the bottom from the CEO. Let's make this a night to remember for our Arkwin families. He had lied. Not just a white lie to spare my feelings, but a strategic lie to keep me away. Or so I thought. Then I remembered the voice on the phone. Kendra's voice. Tell her to come tonight. The more people, the better. Let her humiliate herself. And Gavin's reply, she won't dare do anything. I frowned, staring at the glowing screen. There was a contradiction here. On the phone, they wanted me there to humiliate me. To my face. Gavin told me to stay home. Why? I sat down, piecing the logic together. It was a game of reverse psychology. Gavin knew me. He knew that if he invited me enthusiastically, I might decline because I hate crowds. But if he told me I shouldn't go, if he acted like it was a burden, he knew I would try to be the supportive wife. He knew I would insist. He was planting the seed of exclusion so that I would fight to be included. He wanted me to walk into that trap of my own free will. They wanted a stage. They wanted the Clementine Ballroom, with its chandeliers and champagne towers, to be the backdrop for whatever public execution they had planned for me. They wanted witnesses. I looked at the guest list again. I saw Kendra Vale's name. I saw Gavin's name. And right next to his, in the column for +1, the field was blank. He was waiting for me to fill it in. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest, heavy and solid. I had spent 5 years being the understanding wife, the woman who made soup when he was sick and ironed his shirts for interviews. I had made myself small so he could feel big. I had ignored the intuition that screamed at me when he came home smelling of vanilla. No more. I pulled out my phone and opened the airline app. My sister lived in Chicago, and I had been planning to visit her next month. I canceled the trip. I needed every ounce of focus here, in Atlanta. I walked back to my laptop, the one I had opened the night before. The folder named End Button was staring at me from the desktop. It contained only one file, the audio recording. It was not enough. If I walked into that ballroom with just a recording of an affair, I would be nothing more than a scorned woman causing a scene. They would pity me. Then they would ignore me. Gavin would spin it. He would say I was crazy, jealous, hearing things. I needed more than infidelity. I needed the leverage they were so terrified of. I needed the expense file they had mentioned. Push Sadie's signature onto it. That sentence was the key. They weren't just breaking my heart. They were trying to break my record. They were building a paper trail that led directly to me. I sat down at the table and opened a fresh document. I began to type a timeline. I started with the date the late nights began. I listed every time Gavin had come home after 10 o'clock. I listed the weekends he had gone into the office to catch up. I was not crying. I was not mourning. I was working. I would go to the Clementine Ballroom. I would wear the blue dress. I would smile at his boss. I would shake Kendra's hand. I would let them think they had won. Right up until the moment I opened my mouth. They wanted a show? Fine. I would give them a performance they would never forget. I saved the document and dragged it into the folder. The click of the mouse was loud in the empty house. It sounded like the cocking of a gun. I sat at the mahogany desk in our home office, a space Gavin and I used to share back when we shared everything. Now, it felt like a command center for a war he did not know I was fighting. The morning light was harsh against the computer screen, washing out the colors. But the numbers in the spreadsheet remained black and sharp. I had logged into our joint bank account. Gavin was careful. But arrogance often mimics carelessness. He assumed I never looked at the miscellaneous tab because, for years, I had not. I was the wife who trusted. Today, I was the auditor. I filtered the transaction history for the last 6 months. I was looking for patterns, for anomalies that disrupted the rhythm of our domestic spending. It did not take long. I found a recurring charge labeled Client Entertainment, linked to a supplementary credit card Gavin had issued for household emergencies. $340 on the 12th of August, $280 on the 19th of August, $415 on the 2nd of September. I pulled up the calendar on my phone, the one where I had meticulously recorded every time Gavin texted me that he was working late. The dates matched perfectly. Every single time he had been stuck in a meeting or grinding on the logistics floor, his card was being swiped at the Hartwell Grand Hotel bar or the steakhouse down the street from his office. He was not working. He was financing his affair with our joint savings, labeling it as business expenses that he would likely reimburse later, or perhaps never reimburse at all. But infidelity was just the surface. I needed to find the mechanism of the trap they had discussed on the phone. I opened a new tab and logged into my personal email. It was empty of any notifications from Arquin Studios, which was strange. I had been on their spouse and family mailing list since Gavin started there. Companies do not just drop you from a distribution list unless someone manually removes you, or unless someone intercepts the mail. I went to the trash folder. It was empty. Then I went to the Recovered Deleted Items server folder, a feature most people forget exists. There it was. You are cordially invited. The Arquin 20th Anniversary Gala. It had been delivered 3 days ago at 4 a.m. and deleted at 6:15, 15 minutes before my alarm went off. Gavin had woken up early, logged into my account from his phone, deleted the invitation, and then emptied the trash. He had scrubbed the evidence of the event from my digital life to ensure I would never ask about it. It was a calculated erasure. I restored the email and forwarded it to a secure, encrypted account I had created 10 minutes ago. Then I did something riskier. I switched users on the desktop. Gavin's profile was password protected. But as I stood in the kitchen earlier, I had watched him type his password on his laptop, Clementine 23. It was the name of the project. He was so obsessed with his own brilliance he used it as his security key. I typed it in. The screen unlocked. I did not go to his inbox. That would be too cluttered. I went straight to his drafts folder. People often use drafts as a holding pen for documents they are not ready to send but need to access easily. There were 5 drafts. One caught my eye immediately because of the subject line. Project Ivory. Expense adjustment. Sadie approved. My breath hitched. I clicked on it. Attached to the empty email was a PDF file. I opened it. It was a breakdown of consulting fees for an exterior design firm I had never heard of, totaling nearly $15,000. And there, at the bottom of the page, was my digital signature. I stared at it, my blood running cold. It was a copy of the signature I used for my freelance graphic design contracts. He had lifted it, transparent background and all, and pasted it onto this document. To anyone looking at this file, it appeared that I, Sadie Foster, had been hired as a consultant and had signed off on these expenses. If the project went over budget, or if money went missing, Gavin would not be the one explaining it. I would be. He could claim he recused himself because it was his wife's company, and that I was the one who authorized the funds. It was fraud, pure and simple. I took my phone out. I did not forward the email to myself. That would leave a digital footprint showing the file was sent from his account to mine. Instead, I photographed the screen, making sure the date and time in the corner were visible. Then, I plugged in a USB drive and copied the PDF directly. I needed professional eyes on this. 40 minutes later, I was sitting in a booth at a diner on the other side of town, sliding the printed pages across the Formica table to Jules Harper. Jules had been my best friend since college, but more importantly, she was a forensic accountant for a corporate firm. She knew how to follow the money. Jules adjusted her glasses, her brow furrowing as she scanned the columns of numbers. She did not ask how I got them. She just read. "This is sloppy," she said finally, tapping a manicured fingernail on the paper. "But it is dangerous." "Explain it to me," I said. "Okay, look at these amounts," Jules said. circling 3 figures with a red pen. 4,900, 4,900, 4,800. Do you see the pattern? They are all under 5,000, I noted. Exactly, Jules said. In most corporate structures, any expense over $5,000 requires a vice president's signature. Anything under 5,000 can be approved by a project manager. That is Gavin. He is structuring these payments to stay just below the radar of his superiors. She flipped to the page with my signature. And this, she continued, her voice dropping lower, is the safety net. By attaching an external vendor, you, to these expenses, he is creating a layer of separation. If audit asks why $20,000 flowed out of the project for consulting, he points to this. He says, "Look, we hired an external specialist. She signed off on the deliverables. Here is the paperwork. If the deliverables don't exist, it looks like you defrauded the company, not him." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. So he is stealing money and setting me up to take the fall if he gets caught. It looks like he is funneling the cash into a shell entity, Jules said grimly, probably to pay for something he does not want on his own books, or someone. Kendra, the expensive dinners, the hotel rooms. He was paying for his affair with company money and framing his wife for the theft. What do I do? I asked. Do not confront him, Jules said, grabbing my hand across the table. Her grip was tight, painful. If you tell him you know, he will delete everything. He will shred the hard drives. He will claim you forged this yourself. You need to secure the original metadata. I nodded. I have the file on a drive. Good. Keep it safe. And Sadie? Jules looked me dead in the eye. This isn't a marriage dispute anymore. This is a crime scene. Treat it like one. I drove home in silence. The house was empty when I returned. I went upstairs to the bedroom, but I did not collapse. I did not cry. I felt a strange, icy calm settling over me, sharpening my senses. I called a family law attorney I had found online, a woman with a reputation for being a shark. I kept the call under 4 minutes. I did not tell her the sob story. I asked one question. If I have digital evidence of financial fraud involving my spouse, what is the legal standard for admissibility? She gave me a checklist. Original file formats, no alterations, a clear chain of custody. I hung up and began to work. I located every device I owned, laptop, tablet, old phone. I plugged them all in. I bought 2 terabytes of cloud storage on a server located in Switzerland, paid for with a prepaid debit card I had bought at the grocery store so it would not appear on our bank statement. I uploaded the recording of the phone call. I uploaded the photos of the bank statements. I uploaded the PDF of the expense report with my forged signature. I uploaded the restored email invitation. Then, I created a new document. A timeline. October 1st. Gavin claims late meeting. Expense charge at Hartwell Grand. October 5th. Draft created in Gavin's folder. Project Ivory. October 10th. Gavin tells me he is worried about money. Last night. The phone call. I printed the timeline. I held the paper in my hands, feeling the weight of the ink. This was not just a list of dates. It was a map of his betrayal. Gavin thought he was the director of this play. He thought he could write the script, cast me as the villain, and drop the curtain whenever he pleased. He thought he could control the narrative because he controlled the atmosphere in our home. When he walked into a room, I usually shrank. I usually tried to keep the peace. That was why I could not confront him here. If I screamed at him in the kitchen, he would gaslight me. He would talk over me. He would use his physical presence to intimidate me into silence. No, I needed a different stage. I looked at the date on the restored invitation. The gala was tomorrow night. I walked to my closet and pushed aside the sensible work clothes. Way in the back, still in the garment bag, was the midnight blue dress I had bought for a cousin's wedding that got canceled. It was silk, floor length, and fit like a second skin. I unzipped the bag. The fabric shimmered in the dim light. Don't react, I whispered to the empty room. Conclude? I was done asking questions. I was done wondering why. I had the ledger, I had the details, and tomorrow night, I was going to balance the books. The coffee shop was located 3 blocks from the Arkwin Studios headquarters, far enough to avoid the casual lunch rush, but close enough to feel the gravitational pull of the building. I sat in the corner booth, my back against the cold window, watching the door. I had not slept more than 2 hours the previous night, but fatigue was a luxury I could not afford. Adrenaline was the only fuel I had left. When Leah walked in, she looked like a fugitive. She was young, perhaps 24, with the kind of nervous energy that usually accompanies a first job interview. She wore an oversized coat that swallowed her frame, and her eyes darted around the room, scanning faces before she finally spotted me. She did not wave. She simply hurried over, sliding into the seat opposite me with her head tucked low. "I cannot stay long," Leah whispered, her hands wrapping tightly around the paper cup she had brought in with her. "If Gavin sees me talking to you, I am done. He has eyes everywhere." "He is in a meeting with the logistics board right now," I said calmly. "I checked his schedule. You are safe." Leah was a junior coordinator in the marketing department. I had met her once at a company picnic 6 months ago. She had been bright-eyed and eager then. Now, she looked haunted. I had reached out to her because she was the only one who had liked a photo of my garden on Instagram 2 days ago. A small, inadvertent signal that she still saw me as a person, not just Gavin Pierce's invisible wife. "Why did you agree to meet me?" I asked. Leah took a sip of her coffee, her hand trembling just enough to make the lid rattle. "Because it is wrong, Sadie. What they are doing, it is just wrong." "Tell me," I said. Leah leaned in, her voice dropping so low I had to lean forward to hear her over the hiss of the espresso machine. "It is not a secret inside the office. That is the worst part. You are the only one who does not know, and everyone else just walks around pretending it is normal." "The affair?" I asked. "It is more than that," Leah said. "It is the arrogance. They disappear together. There is a prop room on the 2nd floor, behind the blue screen stage. It has a lock that only managers have keys to. Gavin and Kendra go in there almost every day after lunch, sometimes for an hour. People see them go in. People see them come out. But nobody says a word." I felt a sharp pang in my chest, but I pushed it down. "Why? Why doesn't anyone report it to HR?" "Because Gavin is the golden boy right now," Leah said, her eyes wide. "And Kendra makes it clear that she is the future. Last month, a girl from accounting made a joke about them in the break room. 2 days later, she was transferred to the basement archives. Gavin has power. Sadie, he creates this culture where if you speak up, you disappear." I nodded slowly. It made sense. Gavin thrived on control. He did not just want to cheat. He wanted to do it in a way that proved he was untouchable. "There is something else," Leah said, and this time, she looked physically ill. She stared down at the table, picking at a loose splinter of wood. "I was in the elevator with Kendra last week. She was on the phone with him. She didn't know I was standing in the back corner." "What did she say?" Leah swallowed hard. "She was laughing. She was telling him that she was worried you might ask questions about some papers he brought home, and she said that Gavin told her not to worry." Leah paused, looking up at me with pity in her eyes. I hated that look. "He told her that you are easy," Leah said, the words rushing out. "He said, Sadie will sign her own death warrant if I ask her in my soft voice. He bragged about it. Sadie. He said he just has to lower his tone and call you honey, and you stop reading the fine print." The air in the coffee shop seemed to vanish. If I ask her in my soft voice, the memory hit me like a physical blow. I remembered 2 weeks ago, when he brought me a stack of tax forms. I had started to read the 2nd page, and he had come up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder. He had whispered in my ear, his voice low and gentle, telling me how much he appreciated me handling the boring stuff, how much he loved me. I had smiled. I had put the pen to the paper. I had stopped reading. He had weaponized our intimacy. He had turned my trust into a tool for his fraud. "I am so sorry," Leah said, her voice breaking. "I shouldn't be telling you this. I couldn't stand it anymore. They laugh about it. Sadie, they laugh about how clueless you are." "Don't be sorry," I said. My voice was steady, colder than the winter wind outside. "You are giving me the missing pieces." Leah looked around the shop again, her paranoia spiking. "There are rumors about the finances too. I don't see the numbers. I am just in marketing. But I hear things. The project budget for the Clementine Ballroom is overblown, way overblown. And I heard Gavin telling Kendra that they needed a fall guy outside the company structure, someone who technically counts as a consultant." "An outsider," I said. "Me? Is it true?" Leah asked. "Did you sign those things?" "I am going to handle it," I said. I did not want to drag this girl into the legal mess that was coming. She was just a witness, not a soldier. "Leah, listen to me. You have done a brave thing today, but from this moment on, you do not know me. We never met. You never saw me. Do you understand?" "I am scared of him," she admitted. "He smiles, but his eyes, they are empty." "I know," I said. "I lived with those eyes for 5 years." Leah stood up, buttoning her coat with shaking fingers. "Good luck. Sadie, whatever you are planning, I hope you win." She hurried out the door, disappearing into the gray afternoon. I watched her go, feeling a strange sense of gratitude. She had confirmed the emotional component of the crime. Gavin didn't just steal money, he stole my agency. He mocked my love to his mistress and used it to facilitate his theft. My phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up with a name that used to make my heart flutter. Gavin. I stared at the message preview. "Hey babe, do not bother coming to the gala tomorrow night. Honestly, it is going to be a snooze fest and I am exhausted. I will probably just crash at a hotel near the venue so I don't wake you up coming in late. Love you." It was a masterpiece of manipulation. He was discouraging me from coming while simultaneously setting up his alibi for not coming home. He wanted the night free to celebrate his victory with Kendra. He wanted to parade around that ballroom, drinking champagne, knowing his wife was sitting at home, dutifully waiting, while her signature took the heat for his crimes. He was following the script perfectly. He thought I was the audience. I picked up the phone. I did not type a paragraph. I did not ask why. I did not argue. I typed a single word, the kind of compliant, passive response he expected from the woman he thought he owned. "Okay," I hit send. But in the silence of my mind, the word screamed. No, I was not staying home. I was not crashing. I was coming to the Clementine Ballroom, and I was bringing the fire he thought he had extinguished. I gathered my things and walked out of the coffee shop. The wind was biting, but I didn't feel the cold. I felt the heat of the bridge I was about to burn, and for the first time in months, I felt warm. The double doors of the Clementine Ballroom swung open, and I walked into a wall of sound and light. The air inside was refrigerated to a crisp chill, smelling of expensive perfume, stale champagne, and the metallic tang of ambition. A live jazz band was playing somewhere in the corner, a frantic, brassy tune that fought to be heard over the dull roar of 300 conversations. The room was bathed in a wash of amber and gold lighting, designed to make skin look dewy and jewelry sparkle, but to me, it looked like the inside of a furnace. I moved through the crowd like a ghost. I was wearing the midnight blue silk dress I had retrieved from the back of my closet, the fabric cool against my skin. I had spent an hour on my makeup, contouring my face into a mask of sharp angles and inscrutable calmness. I did not look like the wife who had been told to stay home. I looked like a woman who owned the building. I spotted Gavin near the center of the room. He was holding a flute of champagne, his other hand animatedly gesturing as he spoke to a circle of men in dark suits. He looked radiant. This was his element. He was the architect of the evening, the man of the hour. I approached him from the side. I did not rush. I let my heels click rhythmically against the polished floor. A countdown he did not know was happening. "Gavin," I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the noise like a razor. He turned. The smile on his face froze for a fraction of a second, a glitch in the software of his charm, before he rebooted into the role of the loving husband. "Sadie," he exclaimed, his voice pitching up just slightly. I am so glad you came. You said you were staying in—" He stepped forward and kissed my cheek. His lips were dry. He placed a hand on my waist, a gesture that looked possessive to the audience but felt mechanical to me. As soon as the greeting was properly performed, his hand dropped away from my body as if I were radiating heat. He created a distinct physical gap between us, a subtle signal that I was a guest in his space, not a partner. "I got a second wind," I said, smiling with my mouth but not my eyes. "I realized I could not miss your big night." "Well, you look stunning," he said, glancing over my shoulder as if looking for an exit strategy. Before he could usher me away to the buffet or a dark corner, the circle around us parted. Kendra Vale stepped forward. She was impossible to miss. She wore a dress of crimson velvet that clung to her frame, a deliberate contrast to the sea of black and navy suits. She held her champagne glass by the stem, her fingers long and manicured. She did not look at Gavin. She looked directly at me. "Sadie," Kendra said. Her voice was smooth, like warm syrup. "It is such a surprise to see you. Gavin was just telling us how under the weather you have been feeling." She stepped into the circle, moving into the space next to Gavin with the ease of muscle memory. She did not touch him, not overtly, but her body angled toward his, her shoulder brushing his arm as she turned to face me. It was a claim. She was marking her territory in front of the one person who supposedly held the deed. "I am feeling much better. Thank you," I replied. I let my gaze travel over her, slowly, from the diamond studs in her ears to the hem of her dress. It was an appraisal. I saw her chin lift slightly in defiance. "We have been working so hard on this launch," Kendra said, addressing the group but keeping her eyes on me. "Gavin has been an absolute machine. I don't know how he does it, honestly. I think he lives here more than he lives at home these days." A few people chuckled politely. I did not. I just stared at her. The silence stretched, thin and uncomfortable. "Well, dedication is a virtue," a woman to my left said. I recognized her as Raina Monroe from the PR department. She was a woman who thrived on chaos, her eyes darting between Gavin, Kendra, and me with hungry amusement. Raina took a sip of her drink and leaned in. "Honestly, watching you two work the room tonight, it is hard to tell where the CEO ends and the project leads. Begin. You are like a single entity. I almost forgot Gavin had a life outside of this building." It was a bait, a sharp, barbed hook thrown into the water to see if the wife would bite. Gavin laughed, a nervous, barking sound. "Raina, please. Sadie is the one who keeps me grounded. I would be lost without her." He said the words, but he did not look at me. He looked at Kendra. They shared a micro-expression, a fleeting glance of shared superiority. "Look at her." Their eyes said, "She has no idea." I remained silent. I did not defend my marriage. I did not cling to Gavin's arm. I simply stood there, perfectly still. My silence began to curdle the atmosphere. The polite smiles around the circle faltered. People shifted their weight. In a social setting, silence is a vacuum, and human beings are desperate to fill it. "So," an older man with a heavy gray mustache said, clearing his throat loudly, "the Clementine Project, the projections look aggressive." "They are realistic," Gavin said, seizing the change of subject with desperation. "We have structured the capital flow to maximize efficiency." As he spoke, his phone buzzed in his breast pocket. He pulled it out reflexively. Kendra was standing right next to him, her hands empty, her phone nowhere in sight. But I saw her fingers tapping against her thigh in a nervous rhythm. Gavin glanced at the screen. I was standing at the perfect angle, just behind his shoulder as he turned away from the group to shield the device. The font was large. I read the message in the split second before he swiped it away. Push the file with her signature tonight. I want it done. I looked at Kendra. She was smiling at the man with the mustache, nodding at something he was saying about interest rates. She had texted him while standing 2 feet away. They were orchestrating my destruction in real time, right in front of my face. Gavin slid the phone back into his pocket and turned back to the group, his face composed. Sorry about that. Logistics updates. Never stops. You are a busy man, Gavin, the man with the mustache said. He raised his glass. To Gavin and Kendra. You two have really pulled a rabbit out of the hat with this one. A great team. He said it innocently. To Gavin and Kendra. Not to Gavin and his team. Not to Arquin. He toasted them as a couple. He had made the mistake because their body language screamed unity. They stood with their hips aligned, their feet pointing toward each other. A closed circuit that excluded everyone else, especially me. Gavin froze. Kendra's smile widened, sharp and predatory. Thank you, Arthur, Kendra said softly. They were waiting for me to snap. I could feel it. The tension radiating from Gavin was palpable. He wanted me to ask why Arthur had grouped them together. He wanted me to cry. He wanted me to cause a scene so he could play the long-suffering husband dealing with an unstable, jealous wife. That would be the perfect cover. If I was crazy, then my claims about fraud would be dismissed as the hallucinations of a vindictive woman. They wanted a show. I tightened my grip on my clutch purse. Inside, my phone was recording. The cloud drive was synced. The timeline was printed and folded in the inner pocket. I looked at Gavin, then at Kendra. I let a slow, cold smile spread across my face. It was not a smile of happiness. It was the smile of someone who has just realized they are holding a straight flush while their opponent is bluffing with a pair of twos. Yes, I said, my voice clear and melodic. They certainly are quite the pair, aren't they? It is amazing what you can accomplish when you are willing to do absolutely anything to get what you want. The group went quiet. The subtext was heavy enough to crack the floor tiles. Gavin's eyes narrowed. He opened his mouth to speak, to diffuse, to gaslight. But I am actually here for the presentation, I continued, cutting him off smoothly. I hear the speeches are going to be illuminating. I turned on my heel and walked away. I did not storm off. I did not run. I walked toward the stage, where the microphone stand waited in the spotlight. I felt their eyes on my back, burning. They thought I was retreating. They thought I was fleeing the awkwardness. They were wrong. I was not leaving the battlefield. I was taking the high ground. I did not leave the ballroom. I simply repositioned. I moved to the edge of the room, near a pillar wrapped in white silk and ivy, and watched the dynamic of the party shift. Gavin was no longer standing with the older executives. He had migrated to a looser, louder circle near the open bar. This was his court. Junior vice presidents, eager account managers, and the hangers-on who mistook proximity to power for power itself. Kendra was there, of course, standing so close to him that their shadows merged on the floor. They were drunk. Not stumbling drunk, but high on the cocktail of expensive bourbon and unchecked adrenaline. They had survived the initial greeting with me. They thought the danger had passed. They believed I was somewhere in the back of the room, intimidated by the lights and the scale of their world, perhaps crying in a restroom stall. I waited until the jazz band took a break. The room did not go silent, but the ambient noise dropped significantly, creating pockets of acoustic clarity. I began to walk back toward them. As I approached, I heard Gavin's voice booming over the low hum of conversation. He was gesturing with his glass, the amber liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim. Honestly, it is about leverage, Gavin said, his voice thick with arrogance. You have to know when to hold the assets and when to cut the dead weight. I could leave Sadie at any moment. Tonight, tomorrow. It does not matter. She is purely ornamental at this point. A ripple of laughter went through his circle. It was the sycophantic laughter of men who wanted his job and women who feared his temper. She is sweet, though, Kendra added, her voice dripping with false sympathy. just not built for this world. She thinks a spreadsheet is a tablecloth. More laughter, louder this time. I stepped through the gap between two tall men in tuxedos. I did not ask for permission to enter the circle. I simply occupied the space. The laughter died instantly, cut off as if someone had severed a vocal cord. Gavin turned, his face flushing a deep, mottled red. He blinked, trying to recalibrate his reality. Sadie, we were just talking about asset management, I suggested. My voice was calm, conversational, and deadly. And dead weight? The circle widened. People sense conflict like sharks sense blood. The nearby conversation stopped as heads turned toward us. You are drunk, Gavin, I said. And you are loud. I am celebrating, he snapped, his embarrassment instantly morphing into aggression. Why don't you go get a drink, Sadie? You are making people uncomfortable. Am I? I looked around the circle. I don't think I am the one making them uncomfortable. I think it is the fact that you are lying to them. Sadie, stop, Kendra interjected, stepping forward. Her confidence was brittle now. This is not the place for a domestic squabble. You are right, I said, locking eyes with her. This is not domestic. This is corporate. I lifted my phone. I had already queued the file. My thumb hovered over the screen. What are you doing? Gavin asked, his eyes narrowing. Put the phone away. You said I was ornamental, I said. You said I was background noise, but you forgot something. Gavin, background noise gets recorded. I pressed play. I had turned the volume to the maximum. In the sudden quiet of the room, the audio was piercing. Clink, clink. The sound of champagne glasses hitting each other rang out. Tinny but unmistakable. Then, Kendra's voice, clear as a bell. Tell her to come tonight. The more people, the better. Let her humiliate herself. The color drained from Kendra's face. She looked like she had been slapped. Then Gavin's voice, laughing. She won't dare do anything. She needs me. The crowd around us gasped. This was brutal, ugly, a private cruelty exposed in public. But it was just an affair. It was scandalous. But it was not illegal. I let the recording run. Kendra's voice again. What about the paperwork? Gavin's voice. I have the expense file ready. We just need to push Sadie's signature onto it to make it valid. If the board sees her name on the approval line for the Clementine project, they will stop looking at us. The shift in the room was physical. The air pressure seemed to drop. The expressions on the faces of the people around us changed from titillation to horror. These were business people. They understood infidelity. They saw it every day, but they also understood liability. They understood fraud. Push Sadie's signature. The recording ended with the sharp command. Remember to press end, idiot. Silence, absolute, suffocating silence. Gavin stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. He looked at the phone in my hand as if it were a grenade that had just pulled its own pin. Then, he lunged. Give me that, he roared. Abandoning all pretense of civilization, he threw his champagne glass to the floor. It shattered with a violence that made 3 people scream, and reached for my wrist. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I had anticipated this. Before his fingers could touch me, a heavy hand clamped down on his shoulder. A member of the event security team, a large man who had been hovering near the VIP section, stepped between us. Sir, the guard said, his voice low and firm. Do not touch her. She is recording me without consent, Gavin shouted, spit flying from his lips. He looked wild, his eyes manic. That is illegal. Give me the phone. Actually, I said, my voice cutting through his hysteria. It is a one-party consent state. Gavin, and you were the one who called me. You just forgot to hang up. I turned my phone screen toward the circle of silent, horrified colleagues. I swiped to the next image. It was the photograph of the Project Ivory draft email. The text was small, but the header was legible, and the attachment name was clear. Sadie approved. PDF. And this, I said, projecting my voice so the people in the back could hear, is the document he was talking about, a $15,000 expense report for a shell company, with my digital signature pasted onto the approval line, a signature I never gave. I swiped again, the timeline. And here are the dates, I continued. Every time a withdrawal was made for client entertainment, Gavin was supposedly at home, but the GPS data from our shared car says he was at the Hartwell Grand. I looked at Kendra. She was trembling, her hands clutching her elbows as if she were freezing. It was a misunderstanding, Kendra stammered, her voice thin and reedy. We were joking. It was a role-play thing. It wasn't real. I looked at a woman standing to my right. She was wearing a gray blazer and had the sharp, cynical eyes of a senior auditor. She was not looking at Kendra's dress. She was looking at the image of the expense report on my screen. That is not a joke, the woman whispered, her voice carried. That is embezzlement and forgery. The word fraud began to circulate through the crowd like a virus. It passed from lip to lip. A hiss of condemnation, fraud, fake signature, embezzlement. Gavin stopped struggling against the guard. He looked around the room, realizing for the first time that the walls were closing in. He looked at his boss, who was standing 10 feet away, staring at him with a look of absolute icy detachment. I lowered my phone. I did not need to shout anymore. The truth was out, and it was loud enough to shatter the chandeliers. You wanted me here, Gavin, I said softly. Only for him. You wanted a crowd. You wanted witnesses. Well, look around. I swept my hand toward the room full of people who were now staring at him not as a rising star, but as a liability. You have their attention, I said. Start acting. The silence that followed my declaration was not empty. It was heavy, suffocating, and pregnant with consequence. It was the kind of silence that usually precedes a verdict. The circle of onlookers had expanded, pushing back against the tables and the bar, creating a wide, terrified perimeter around us. They were no longer guests at a gala. They were witnesses at a crime scene, and nobody wanted to be close enough to get splattered by the fallout. Then, the crowd parted. It wasn't a casual shifting of bodies. It was a respectful, almost fearful retreat, like the Red Sea dividing. Diane Mercer walked through the gap. The chief operating officer of Arkwin Studios was a woman who did not walk. She glided with the unstoppable momentum of a glacier. She was in her late 50s, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob that looked like it could slice paper. Beside her walked Marisol Grant, the head of human resources, a woman known for her encyclopedic knowledge of labor law and her absolute lack of a sense of humor. Gavin saw them, and for the first time, the color drained completely from his face, leaving him a pale, sweaty shade of gray. He looked like a man who had just realized the parachute wasn't opening. "Diane," Gavin choked out, his voice cracking. He tried to compose himself, pulling at the lapels of his tuxedo jacket as if straightening his clothes could straighten out the mess he had made. "Diane, I am so sorry about this disturbance. My wife she is not herself tonight. We are having some personal issues, and she has had a bit too much to drink." He was doing it. He was playing the card he had prepared. He was painting me as the hysterical, unstable woman who needed to be managed. Diane stopped 3 feet in front of him. She did not look at him. She looked at me. Her eyes were dark and assessing, scanning me for signs of intoxication or madness. She saw neither. She saw a woman standing perfectly still, holding a phone like a weapon. "Mrs. Pierce," Diane said, her voice cool and level. "It is Foster," I corrected her. "Sadie Foster." Diane nodded once, accepting the correction. She turned to Gavin. "Gavin, stop talking." "But Diane, she is recording private conversations. She is hallucinating about—" "I said stop," Diane said. She didn't shout, but the command had the weight of a gavel strike. She turned to the woman beside her. Marisol Grant stepped forward. She held a tablet against her chest. She looked at me with a professional detachment that was almost clinical. "Ms. Foster," Marisol said, "you played an audio recording. Do you have the source file for that recording?" "I do," I said. "And the document regarding Project Ivory?" Marisol asked. "The one with the alleged forged signature?" "I do," I replied. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a small, silver USB drive. I also pulled out a folded piece of paper with a QR code printed on it. This drive contains the original audio file, the metadata showing the time and date of the recording, and the screen capture of the draft email from Gavin's work account. This paper has a link to a secure cloud server where verified copies are stored with a third-party legal firm. I held them out. "I am not hysterical. Marisol, I am prepared." Marisol took the items. "Thank you." "This is insane," Gavin shouted, his control snapping. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "She fabricated this. She is jealous because I have been working late. She is trying to ruin my reputation because she is insecure. You cannot possibly believe this. This pantomime." Diane Mercer finally looked at him. Her expression was one of profound disappointment, not in him as a person, but in him as an investment that had just crashed. "Gavin," Diane said, "I did not hear a woman screaming about lipstick on a collar. I heard you, on a recording, discussing how to push a signature onto a financial document to hide costs from the board. That is not a domestic dispute. That is a confession to conspiracy to commit fraud." "It was taken out of context," Gavin pleaded, sweat now visibly running down his temple. "We were brainstorming. It was a hypothetical scenario for risk management. We were role-playing how to handle a crisis." "Hypothetical," Diane repeated, tasting the word like sour milk. Suddenly, a voice spoke up from the edge of the circle. "It did not sound hypothetical 3 weeks ago." Everyone turned. A man stepped forward from the shadows near the stage. It was the director of public relations for Arquin. He was a quiet man who usually spent his time putting out small fires. He held his phone in his hand. "Diane," the PR director said, "I recorded the prep meeting for the quarterly review 3 weeks ago. I do it for all compliance meetings to ensure accuracy for the press release." He tapped his screen. A recording began to play. It was distinct from mine. It was the echoey sound of a conference room. Gavin's voice floated out, arrogant and relaxed. "Look, if the numbers on Ivory get too hot, we just point to the external consultant. My wife's name is on the paperwork. If the audit comes, she is the shield. The company stays clean. I stay clean. And some freelancer takes the hit." The silence in the ballroom deepened. This was the nail in the coffin. My recording proved the intent. This recording proved the premeditation. Kendra, who had been standing frozen beside Gavin, suddenly moved. She took a step away from him, a physical disassociation that was as loud as a scream. "He made me do it," Kendra whispered. Gavin whipped his head around to stare at her. "What?" Kendra looked at Diane, her eyes wide with panic. The facade of the confident, crimson-clad executive crumbled, revealing a terrified employee trying to save her severance package. "I didn't want to," Kendra stammered, her voice rising in pitch. "Gavin told me that if I didn't help him fix the budget, he would fire me. He said he had the authority. He told me the plan about Sadie, about Mrs. Foster, and said I had to play along or I was out. I was scared. He is my superior." "You lying witch!" Gavin roared. He lunged toward her, but the security guard was there instantly, slamming a heavy arm across Gavin's chest and pinning him back. "You came up with half the ideas. You typed the email." "He forced me," Kendra cried, tears now streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "I am a victim here." "Enough," Diane said. She didn't raise her voice, but the single word ended the shouting match instantly. She looked at Marisol. Marisol nodded. She looked at Gavin, then at Kendra. "Gavin Pierce, Kendra Vale, as of this moment, you are both placed on immediate unpaid administrative leave pending a full internal and external investigation. You are to surrender your company phones and badges immediately to security. You can't do this, Gavin whispered, the fight draining out of him as the reality set in. The Clementine Project. The gala. The gala is over, Diane said coldly. Security will escort you both to the exit. Do not return to the premises. Do not access the network. Any attempt to contact company clients or employees will be met with immediate legal action. 2 more security guards materialized from the edges of the room. One moved toward Kendra, who was openly sobbing now, her hands covering her face. The other moved toward Gavin. Gavin looked at me. His eyes were wide, baffled, as if he was trying to solve a complex equation and failing. He looked at the wife he had called ornamental, the woman he thought was a safe, silent background character. Sadie, he said, his voice hollow. Sadie, tell them I wouldn't. I looked at him. I did not smile. I did not frown. I felt absolutely nothing. The man standing there was a stranger. I have told them everything they need to know. Gavin, I said. The guards took his arms. He didn't fight this time. He slumped, allowing himself to be led away like a prisoner of war. Kendra followed, weeping, stumbling in her high heels, stripped of her dignity and her arrogance, when the double doors swung shut behind them. The ballroom remained quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet now. 5 minutes ago, the silence had been about the scandal of a husband cheating on his wife. It had been the silence of social shock, the titillation of a soap opera coming to life. Now the silence was cold and sharp. It was the silence of people mentally calculating their own exposure. I saw executives exchanging nervous glances. I saw people checking their own phones, perhaps wondering if they had ever sent an email that could be read aloud in a room like this. The air didn't smell like expensive perfume anymore. It smelled like fear. It smelled like the cold, antiseptic scent of a federal investigation. Diane Mercer turned to me. The warmth did not return to her eyes, but the respect was there. Mrs. Foster, she said, I apologize that this happened under our roof. We will be in touch regarding the investigation. I expect you will, I said. My lawyer has the files. I assume Arquin will want to cooperate fully to avoid further public embarrassment. Diane held my gaze for a long second. She knew exactly what I was saying. I wasn't just a witness. I was a liability she needed to manage. Of course, she said. She turned and walked away, Marisol flanking her, heading straight for the PR director to begin damage control. I stood alone in the center of the ballroom. The music had not started again. The party was dead. I looked down at my hands. They were steady. I had walked in here to save myself. I had done more than that. I had burned the script they wrote for me, and in the ashes, I had found my voice. The double doors leading to the rooftop parking deck were heavy, requiring a shove of my shoulder to open. As I stepped out, the wind hit me instantly. It was a sharp, biting gust that swept across the concrete expanse, carrying the smell of ozone and exhaust fumes. It felt wonderful. It felt like the night air was scrubbing the scent of stale perfume and deception off my skin, erasing the fingerprints of the last 5 years. I walked toward the section where I had parked my car, my heels clicking on the pavement. The city skyline was a blur of lights in the distance, indifferent to the catastrophe that had just unfolded 3 floors below. I reached for my keys, my hand plunging into my clutch, when I heard the heavy door slam open behind me. Steps, fast, uneven, desperate steps. Sadie, wait! I did not turn around. I knew the cadence of that run. It was the same sound I used to hear when Gavin would rush out the door in the morning, claiming he was late for a meeting that I now knew never existed. Sadie, please. He caught up to me near the concrete pillar marked 4B. He was out of breath, his chest heaving beneath his dress shirt. His tie was undone, hanging loosely around his neck like a noose he had loosened but not removed. He looked frantic, his eyes wide and searching, stripping away the polished executive veneer he had worn so confidently an hour ago. You have to stop this, Gavin panted, moving to block my path to the car. You have to go back down there and tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you were angry. Tell them you edited the recording." I looked at him. Under the harsh halogen security lights, he looked gray and diminished. "I cannot edit a live performance, Gavin, and I certainly cannot edit a bank statement." "I can fix it," he pleaded, his voice dropping to a frantic whisper. He took a step closer, invading my personal space. "I can fix the money. I have some liquidity. I can move funds around before the external audit starts on Monday. I can make the deficit disappear. But I need you to retract the accusation. If you tell Diane you gave me verbal permission to use your signature, it becomes a procedural error, not a crime. I get a slap on the wrist. We survive this." I stared at him, marveling at the sheer density of his delusion. "We? There is no we. Gavin, there is you, and there is the mess you made." "Don't do this to me," he said, and for a second, his voice cracked. "I am your husband. I made a mistake. I slipped up. It was just a slip of the tongue on the phone. Sadie, I was showing off for Kendra. It didn't mean anything. A slip of the tongue," I repeated slowly. "Yes, just stupid, drunk talk. A slip of the tongue takes 1 second. Gavin," I said, my voice flat and hard against the wind. "Forging a signature takes time. Creating a shell company takes planning. Lying to my face every night for 6 months is not a slip. It is a model. You are not a man who made a mistake. You are a pattern." He wiped a hand across his mouth, his eyes darting toward the door as if he expected the police to burst through at any second. "Sadie, listen to me. You don't understand how these people work. They will destroy me." "I am not the one destroying you," I said. "I just turned on the lights. Just listen." He grabbed the air in front of him, his fingers twitching. "I can pay back the $15,000. I can settle the account. Just don't let them dig into that file. If they open the metadata on the Ivory project, if they see the modification history, Sadie, please, if they look too deep, they are going to find the other transfers." The wind whistled through the metal railing of the parking deck, but his words hung in the air, heavy and absolute. They are going to find the other transfers. He had just admitted that the $15,000 was not the extent of it. It was just the tip of the iceberg. He wasn't just trying to cover up a single instance of fraud. He was trying to keep the lid on a Pandora's box of theft. "Thank you, Mr. Pierce," a voice said from the shadows behind the stairwell enclosure. "That clarification is extremely helpful." Gavin spun around, nearly losing his balance. Marisol Grant stepped out from the darkness. She was not alone. Beside her was a man I did not recognize, but he wore the uniform of Arquin's internal security detail, and he was holding a digital recorder. The little red light on the device was steady and unblinking. "You followed me?" Gavin hissed, his face twisting into a mask of shock. "We were ensuring Mrs. Foster reached her vehicle safely, as per company policy regarding hostile terminations," Marisol said calmly. She adjusted her glasses, looking at Gavin with the same dispassionate interest one might show a bug under a microscope. "However, your admission regarding other transfers and the modification history of the Ivory file has been noted. We will be expanding the scope of the forensic audit to include all projects you have managed in the last 3 years." Gavin looked from Marisol to me, and then back to Marisol. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He had walked right into the trap. He had thought he was negotiating with a wife he could manipulate, but he had been confessing to a jury he didn't know was there. The panic in his eyes curdled into rage. It was a sudden, ugly transformation. He bared his teeth, his hands curling into fists at his sides. "You set me up," he snarled, turning his fury on me. "You bitch! You planned this! You led me up here to get me to talk." "I came up here to get my car," I said calmly. "You followed me. You did the talking." "You ruined everything," he shouted, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "My career, my reputation. You sabotaged me because you couldn't handle the fact that I moved on. You are vindictive." His voice was loud, but it was brittle, It shook with the vibration of a man who knew he was screaming into the void. "I did not sabotage your career, Gavin," I said. I felt a strange sense of pity for him. Not love, not compassion, just the pity one feels for a creature that has chewed off its own leg to escape a trap it built itself. "I didn't make you steal. I didn't make you cheat. I didn't make you treat me like a prop. You are not hearing my revenge. You are hearing the echo of your own choices coming back to you." He let out a strangled sound of frustration and took a step toward me, his hand raising as if to grab my arm, to shake me, to force me to understand his twisted logic. "Don't you dare walk away from me when I am—" "Mr. Pierce!" The security officer moved with startling speed. He didn't tackle Gavin. He didn't draw a weapon. He simply stepped into the space between us, a solid wall of authority. He held up a hand, palm out, stopping Gavin in his tracks. "Step back, sir," the officer said. His tone was not a suggestion. "Do not touch her. Do not approach her. You are currently trespassing on private property." Gavin froze. His hand hovered in the air, inches from the officer's chest. He looked at the guard. Then he looked at Marisol, who was typing something into her phone, likely alerting the legal team. Finally, he looked at me. In that moment, the last shred of his power evaporated. He wasn't the project manager. He wasn't the golden boy of Arkwin Studios. He wasn't the husband who controlled the household mood. He was just a man in a disheveled tuxedo standing in a cold parking lot, blocked by a security guard, watching his wife look at him with total indifference. He lowered his hand, his shoulders slumped, the anger drained away, leaving only a hollow, pathetic exhaustion. "Sadie," he whispered. It was a plea, but it was too late. "Goodbye, Gavin," I said. I turned my back on him. I walked to my car, unlocked the door, and slid into the driver's seat. I locked the doors immediately. As I started the engine, I saw in the rearview mirror that the security officer was escorting Gavin toward the elevator, guiding him not like a threat, but like a confused child. I put the car in reverse and backed out. I drove down the ramp, winding my way down to the street level, leaving the roof, the wind, and the wreckage of my marriage behind me. I did not turn on the radio. I just drove. The silence in the car feeling not like emptiness, but like peace. I drove home from the hotel in silence, but my mind was anything but quiet. The adrenaline from the ballroom and the rooftop was beginning to fade, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity that felt less like shock and more like the focus of a surgeon. I had just dismantled my husband's reputation in front of his peers, but as I pulled into our driveway, I realized the demolition was not yet complete. My phone rang the moment I stepped into the kitchen. It was Jules. "Did you do it?" she asked, skipping the greeting. "It is done," I said, tossing my keys onto the counter. "He is suspended, pending investigation." "Good," Jules said, her voice tight. "Because you need to hear this. I have been digging deeper into that PDF file you sent me, the one with your signature on it. I ran it through a text recognition program to analyze the fine print at the bottom of the invoice. I poured myself a glass of water, my hand steady. And? "Sadie, this is not just an expense report," Jules said. "It is a liability waiver. The language hidden in the footer states that the approving consultant, that is you, accepts full legal and financial responsibility for the disbursement of funds in the event of an external audit. It explicitly indemnifies the project manager." I froze, the glass halfway to my mouth. "Translate that for me." "Jules," I whispered, though I already knew the answer. "It means if the company found out the money was missing, Gavin wouldn't just claim he made a mistake," Jules explained, her voice trembling with anger. "He legally structured the document so that you would be the one sued for restitution. He wasn't just stealing money. Sadie, he was setting you up to pay it back. He was going to let you go to prison or declare bankruptcy to save his own skin." I set the glass down. It hit the granite counter with a hard thwack. I remembered the phone call, the way he had laughed. If the story breaks, she takes the fall. I had thought he meant socially, I thought he meant he would blame the affair on my coldness or my lack of support, but it was darker than that. He intended to use me as a human shield against the law. The soft voice he bragged about using to get me to sign things, it was the weapon he used to put my neck in the noose. He prepared a coffin for me, I said softly. Exactly, Jules said. You need to get this to their legal department. Now, this proves premeditated malice. It takes it from sloppy accounting to criminal conspiracy. I am on it, I said. Thanks, Jules. I hung up and immediately sat down at my laptop. The house felt different now. It wasn't a home anymore. It was just a building where I happened to keep my things. My phone pinged again. A text from Leah. I heard what happened. Security is swarming the office. Everyone is terrified. But Sadie, thank you. I know 3 other assistants who were threatened with performance reviews if they ever mentioned the prop room. You didn't just expose an affair, you broke the lock. I read the message twice. The culture of silence Gavin had cultivated relied on the fear that he was untouchable. Tonight, I had touched him. I opened my email client. I composed a new message addressed to Diane Mercer and Marisol Grant. I did not bother with pleasantries. Subject: Supplementary evidence. Project Ivory liability assignment. I attached the analysis Jules had just given me, highlighting the liability clause. Then, I opened the timeline I had created. I added a new column. GPS correlation. I cross-referenced every single date on the expense report with the metadata from the photos Gavin had sent me on those nights. Photos of his late dinner at the office, which, upon inspection of the background details, were clearly taken in hotel rooms or bars. I matched the timestamps. October 3rd. Claimed, late strategy meeting at Arkwin. Reality, photo of a martini glass. Geolocation tag, Hartwell Grand Hotel. Expense filed, $300 for client consultation. It was irrefutable. I zipped the files into a folder named The Shield Protocol and hit send. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was a private number. Mrs. Foster? Diane Mercer's voice came through the line. She sounded tired, but alert. Ms. Mercer? I replied. We received your email, Diane said. I am calling to tell you that we have forwarded this to our external forensic team. I also want to tell you something off the record, because I believe you deserve to know the scope of this. I am listening. Our internal audit team has been flagging irregularities in a project cluster codenamed Ivory Cut for 3 months, Diane revealed. We knew money was bleeding out, nearly $50,000 over 2 quarters, but we couldn't find the exit wound. The paperwork always looked perfect. The approvals were always external. Because they were mine, I said. Because they were forged to look like yours, Diane corrected firmly. We were looking for a hacker or a vendor breach. We never suspected the project lead was using his spouse's identity as a dump site for illicit transfers. You just handed us the missing piece of the puzzle. You solved a case we didn't know how to crack. I didn't do it for Arkwin, I said honestly. I know, Diane said, but you saved us months of litigation. We are terminating his access to the server farm as we speak. He is done. Sadie? Thank you. Diane, I hung up. The clock on the wall read 2 a.m. Then, the barrage started. My phone began to vibrate incessantly against the table. Gavin, message 1, 2:05 a.m. Sadie, please, pick up. I am at a motel off the highway. I don't have my wallet. Security took my company card. I am scared. Message 2, 2:07 a.m. We can fix this. I love you. Remember our trip to Cabo? Remember how good we were? Don't throw 5 years away because of one bad night. Message 3, 2:12 a.m. Pick up the damn phone. Message 4, 2:20 a.m. You think you are so smart? You think you are the hero? You are just a bitter housewife who couldn't keep her man happy. You ruined my life. Message 5, 2:25 a.m. If you send them any more files, I swear to God, Sadie, I will make you regret it. I know where your sister lives. I know your passwords. I watched the messages roll in, a spectrum of manipulation shifting from pity to rage in real time. A week ago, these texts would have terrified me. They would have made me cry, made me question my reality. Now, I simply took a screenshot of each one. I opened a new folder in my cloud drive. Post-termination harassment. I uploaded the screenshots. Then, I forwarded them to my divorce lawyer and CC'd Marisol Grant at HR. Gavin Pierce is currently attempting to intimidate a witness and threaten a stakeholder. I wrote in the body of the email, "Please add this to his file." I did not block him. Blocking him would stop the flow of evidence. I simply turned off the notifications. I sat back in the chair and looked at the empty office. I realized then that my revenge wasn't about the gala. It wasn't about the public humiliation or the loss of his job. Those were just consequences. The real revenge was this. I was taking back the pen. For 5 years, Gavin had written the story of our life. He had written me as the supportive, clueless wife. He had written himself as the hard-working, burdened hero. He had written a plot twist where I went to jail for his crimes. But he forgot that every story has an editor. I wasn't doing this to hurt him. Pain fades. Humiliation heals. I was doing this to ensure that when the history of this marriage was written, his version would not survive. I was cutting his narrative rights. I stood up and walked to the window. The streetlights were humming outside. I was alone, truly alone, for the first time in a decade. And for the first time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like a blank page. "End button," I whispered to the glass. I turned off the light and went upstairs. I had a meeting with a lawyer at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I intended to be well rested. The conference room on the top floor of Arquin Studios was designed to intimidate. It had floor-to-ceiling glass walls, a table long enough to land a plane on, and an air conditioning system set to a temperature that discouraged emotional outbursts. It was Monday morning at 9 o'clock sharp. The weekend had evaporated into a blur of legal consultations and data uploads. And now, the reckoning was sitting in leather chairs. Diane Mercer sat at the head of the table. Marisol Grant was to her right. On the opposite side sat Gavin and Kendra. They looked like ghosts of the people they had been on Friday night. Gavin was wearing a suit that looked slept in, his tie crooked, his eyes rimmed with red. Kendra was staring at her hands. Her posture collapsed, stripped of the crimson velvet and the arrogance. I sat at the far end of the table, alone. My divorce lawyer, a sharp woman named Helen, had advised me not to say a word unless directly addressed. I didn't need to speak. The folder in front of Diane was thick enough to do the talking. "We have reviewed the evidence submitted over the last 48 hours, Diane began. Her voice was devoid of inflection. It was the voice of a corporation cutting out a tumor. The internal audit team, cross-referencing with the data provided by Mrs. Foster, has reached a conclusion." Gavin leaned forward, desperation radiating off him like heat. "Diane, please, before you say anything, you have to understand the pressure I was under. The Clementine project was over budget. I was trying to solve a problem for the company. I was trying to be creative. Creativity involves innovation." "Gavin," Diane said coldly, "this was embezzlement." She opened the folder. "We have found evidence of systemic abuse of company funds totaling nearly $60,000 over the last 18 months. Diane read, "These funds were diverted through shell vendor accounts and disguised as consultation fees. Furthermore, we have confirmed that you utilized company resources to facilitate a personal relationship with a subordinate, Ms. Vale, during work hours." Kendra flinched. "I was pressured," she whispered. "I told you. He is my boss. I thought if I said no, I would lose my job." Marisol Grant looked up from her tablet. "We considered that, Miss Vale. However, we recovered chat logs from the internal messaging system. You were not a passive victim. You actively suggested the naming convention for the fake expense accounts. You joked about, and I quote, bleeding the beast dry. That is not coercion. That is conspiracy." Kendra covered her face with her hands. A sob escaped her throat, wet and pathetic. But the signature, Gavin blurted out. He slammed his hand on the table, making everyone jump except me. He pointed a shaking finger at me. Look at the file. The ivory cut expense report. It has Sadie's signature on it. She signed it. She is the external consultant. If anyone is liable for that money, it is her. She is the one who approved the withdrawal. It was his final play. The SHIELD protocol. He was actually trying to do it. He was trying to frame me in front of the people who had just caught him. Diane looked at him with a mixture of pity and disgust. We looked at the signature. Gavin. Then you see it, Gavin cried, his eyes wide and manic. She is in on it. You cannot fire me without arresting her. I looked at Diane. She gave me a slight nod. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. I slid it down the long, polished table. It stopped right in front of Gavin. That is the metadata report for the PDF file, I said softly. Gavin looked down at the paper. The document was created on October 5th at 2:30 in the morning, I explained. The user profile that created the document is logged as Gavin PEA admin. The IP address traces back to your laptop, which was connected to the Wi-Fi at the Hartwell Grand Hotel at that exact time. I paused, letting the silence fill the room. I was at home, Gavin, asleep. The digital forensic analysis proves that the signature image was copy-pasted from a tax return I sent you last year. You created the forgery. You attached the liability. You built the trap. And now, you are the only one standing in it. Gavin stared at the paper. His mouth opened. But no sound came out. The logic was airtight. The technology he had tried to manipulate had turned around and bitten him. The company accepts Mrs. Foster's evidence as conclusive, Diane stated. Gavin Pierce, your employment is terminated effective immediately for cause. We are withholding all severance and accrued bonuses to cover a portion of the restitution. The legal department is currently preparing a file to hand over to the district attorney regarding the fraud charges. And Ms. Vale, Marisol added, your contract is also terminated for violation of the Code of Ethics and failure to report financial malfeasance. Security is waiting to escort you both out. Gavin slumped back in his chair. He looked small. The golden boy was gone, replaced by a man facing unemployment, debt, and potential jail time. There is one more thing, I said. Gavin looked at me. His eyes were dull. What? You want to rub it in? You want to tell me how much you hate me? No, I said. I want to clear up a timeline issue. I pulled a second document from my folder. It was a court filing, stamped and dated. You kept telling everyone at the gala that I was jealous, I said. You told them I was reacting to the affair. You told me on the roof that I was vindictive. I pushed the paper toward him. I filed for divorce on Friday morning. Gavin, 8 hours before the gala started, before I walked into that ballroom, before I played the recording. Gavin looked at the date stamp. He blinked, trying to process the information. I didn't destroy you because I was a scorned woman reacting in the heat of the moment, I said, my voice steady and calm. I had already decided to leave you. The only reason I came to the gala was because you tried to make me a criminal. I wasn't fighting for our marriage. I was fighting for my name. The realization hit him harder than the firing. He realized that for the last 3 days, he hadn't been manipulating me. I had been 5 steps ahead of him the entire time. I don't even know who you are, Gavin whispered. He looked at me like I was a stranger he had just met on a bus. I stood up, smoothing the skirt of my dress. I picked up my bag. You never looked closely, I said. I nodded to Diane and Marisol. Thank you for your time. I walked out of the conference room. I did not look back. I heard Kendra sobbing again, and I heard Gavin's chair scrape against the floor. But I kept walking. I walked past the receptionist, past the security guards, and out the front doors of Arkwin Studios. The sun was shining outside. It was a bright, clear autumn day. The air tasted clean. I walked to my car and sat in the driver's seat. I didn't start the engine immediately. I just sat there, listening to the quiet. My phone, which I had placed on the passenger seat, lit up. It was ringing. The name on the screen was Gavin. He was calling me. Maybe to scream, maybe to beg, maybe to ask how I could do this to him. It didn't matter. The script was finished. The production was over. I looked at the screen. I looked at the red circle with the phone icon inside it. I don't hear anything anymore, I whispered to the empty car. Not because I am afraid of the truth, but because I have had enough. I reached out with my index finger. I didn't hesitate. I didn't tremble. I pressed the button. End. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. So please drop a comment down below with your location and let me know what you thought of Sadie's revenge. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more satisfying takedowns, please make sure to subscribe to the Olivia Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story get heard by even more people.